Man, what's up, YouTube? It's your boy Tyrone Hunter back with another edition of What's Really Good Entertainment. If you're just checking in for the first time, hit the like button on the way in the door, hit the subscribe button on the way out the door. If you've been rocking with me, I appreciate you. Stay tuned as we continue to drop this dope content. You see the title, you know my motto, I'm not going to hold you. Today, what we're going to be talking about is how me losing my grandmother affected my life. Now, the reason why I feel that this is a important topic to discuss is because everybody have what's called a turning point, or a point in time, or a point in their life that affected their life in a way where it set the course for everything else that happened in your life. So for instance, in my case, me losing my grandmother when I was 8 years old, it made me very angry. And from that point forward, that's what led to me running the streets. That's what led to me, going to group home and institutions, eventually going to prison, being in a gang. All of those things stem from me losing my grandmother. So if this is something that you want to hear about so you could get an understanding as to how certain events, traumatical or otherwise, affect our lives in the long run, man, stay tuned for this topic. Make sure you stay to the end of the video because, again, this is a different kind of video, but this is all something that could be very helpful to people who's trying to understand, like, why they are the way that they are, or why did their life go in the direction that it went in. So without further ado, let's get into this topic. All right, so for as long as I can remember, like, my grandmother was the one that put a whole lot of effort into me. Just talking to me, just vibing with me, me spending time with her. She was like my safe space. You feel what I'm saying? Because it was a lot going on at that time. And I remember her passing away when I was about 8 years old. And it may seem crazy that what happened her passing away at 8 years old, how that affected my whole life. It may sound crazy, but when I found out that this was possible, because usually when you at a point where you're getting to know yourself, be it you go to a psychologist, psychiatrist, or whatever, they try to take you back into a point in time where you remember something that happened and how your behavior changed from that point going forward. So I was able to go backwards in time and realize that that was the moment in time. So my grandmother's name was Thelma, and she traveled a lot. She was a singer, she sung in a lot of different clubs. And I remember she always traveled, She was traveling like all over the world. And she wound up having a stroke because she had got up in age. She wound up having a stroke. She was bedridden. So we had got her a hospital bed in the house. And it was a hospital bed like you could pull the bars up. You understand? So, and the bars lock in place. So I remember if I wasn't in school, if I wasn't, running around outside with my friends, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. I used to just sit on her bed and talk to her, sometimes lay next to her and, talk to her. I can't really remember what the conversation was about at this time, but I know I spent a lot of time talking to her. And then, like, anytime that I would leave her room, what I would do is I would have to pull up the metal bar and lock it in place because, again, she had a stroke. So if she rolled over, she would just roll right out the bed because one part of her body was paralyzed at the time. So I remember this day like it was yesterday. So my mother was taking us, because we was living in Brooklyn. My mother was taking us to Harlem, to my aunt's house. had something going on over there. And I was in the room with my grandmother. And I was telling my mom, I was like, nah, I don't want to go. I want to stay here with grandma. And she's like, you can't stay here with grandma because it's going to be nobody to look after you. And I'm like, I could look after myself, grandma here. And she was like, no, you got to go with me. So I'm like, so is grandma going? She's like, no, grandma going to stay here. Now, mind you, my grandmother was bedridden, right? She was in a hospital bed. So even if she had to do something like get up and use the bathroom, she needed assistance to do that. So in us leaving and going to Harlem and leaving her in the house, we had to take a train from Brooklyn to Harlem. So us leaving her in the house, and she would have to stay there, for at least 4 or 5 hours for us to make the trip to Harlem and then, get back to Brooklyn. We was leaving her by herself. I wasn't thinking this at the time, but I just didn't want to go. I wanted to stay with her. So my mother was like, nah, come on, you're going. So I'm like, all right, cool. So I was in there talking to my mother while everybody was finished getting ready. And then when my mother called me and told me we was leaving out the door, I just left out the house. So we come back later on that night. And when we get to the house, the first thing I do is I go into my grandmother's room. Because even before, I would go to bed, I would go in there and just, kiss on the cheek. Or say goodnight to her, be it if she was asleep or if she was up. So this is what I decided to do. I was just going in there to tell her goodnight. She was laying on the floor. So I called my mother. I was like, Mom, grandma fell out the bed. She laying on the floor. So my mother called the ambulance, and they wound up coming. My grandmother wound up going to the hospital. She was in the hospital for a couple of weeks, and then she wound up passing away. Now, the reason why she passed away, they said that when she had rolled out of the bed and fell, she wound up having another stroke. And maybe if, she would, because we don't know exactly what time she fell out the bed. We was going for a little minute. We left about 8 something. We didn't get back to like about 1 something in the morning. So ain't no telling how long, she was on the floor from falling out the bed. And she passed away, and we had the funeral and things of that nature. And I didn't know it at the time, but ever since my grandmother died, that's when everything about me changed. My attitude, like I got rude, I got disrespectful, I started cursing a lot. I started fighting a lot. I was good in school, and I did my schoolwork, didn't give no problems in school. Now I'm getting into a lot of problems in school, always fighting, getting suspended, fighting my brother all the time. Now I want to run around outside, with the other kids, getting into all kind of trouble. And I went to my first group home. I went to my first group home when I was 8 years old. And then from there, it was just like group homes, institutions, DFY, which is youth jail, and all of those other things. But it took me some time to realize that I was blaming myself for her passing, right? And let me tell you why I was blaming myself. Because the hospital bed that she had, as I told you, it had a metal bar that you pull a metal bar up and then lock in place. So if she rolls over, it will prevent her from falling out the bed. Well, because my mother was rushing me to leave so that we could go to Harlem, I wound up just leaving out and not pulling up the security bar. And that's the reason why she was able to roll out of the bed and fall and, and hurt herself. And, pretty much wound up passing away as a result of that. So I always carried that with me. And I that's what built up a lot of anger, because I was mad at myself, like I was the cause of it. And although my mother, my aunts, uncles, other relatives was like, nah, you can't blame yourself. Like, it wasn't you. She had a stroke, and that's how she passed away. And, my logic was like, well, if she would have never rolled out the bed and, and fell, then, you know, she wouldn't have had another stroke. I mean, she was up in age, and she would have passed away eventually, like we all will, but she wouldn't have passed away then. So again, I was harboring that anger because I felt that I was the cause of that, and that was the one moment in my life that changed the rest of my life. You know, prior to that, I was a cool kid. You know, I ain't really get into much. I like going to school. I like getting my education, like reading, and you know, when that happened, that everything just went out the window. I was turned. You know, I was turned. Start going to group homes and, you know, youth facilities, and you know, and then I just got into that street mode where I was running the streets, and you know, whatever it was to do in the streets, that's what I was doing. From robbing, you know, to carrying guns, to selling drugs, you know, to shooting guns, to all of those things that wound up leading me to prison, and then in prison joining a gang, and then going through that whole thing, you know, and now being that I'm a little bit older, and being that I've been taking time and effort, you know, to put into myself to like figure certain things out about myself, to try to calm down my attitude, you know, deal with my frustrations, all of those things. I was able to figure out that that was a very traumatic moment in my life that changed and altered the course of my life. So everything that I did, everything that I became, you know, all of the negativity was as a result of that moment. So the reason why I wanted to share this video is because a lot of people out there, you have a certain attitude, you have a certain way of doing things, you have a lot of pent up anger. You know, you made choices that sometimes looking back, you're like, why did I make that choice? Like I wasn't that kind of individual. Well, all of that is a result of certain things that we experience in life. And over time, we forget it. But if you go back to that time, and, you know, you could go back to the root of what caused you to make that turn or go in that direction when you started making certain messed up decisions. If you could pull that thing, you know, out the dirt from the root and discard it, then you could start from that day forward, you know, getting your life back on track. So if, you know, you have a certain moment in time that it was traumatic or altered and changed the course of your life, you know, like the video, if you know somebody that experienced, you know, a traumatic point in life that affected their life, you know, make sure you share this video, you know, so that they could hopefully learn something from it. If you lost a loved one, you know, somebody dear to your life, and it caused a lot of anger, and it caused you to, you know, get violent, to be aggressive, to be whatever it was, you know, and you want to share that story, then make sure, you know, you put that in the comment section, you know, because healing is for everybody, and it's each one teach one. Like, it's okay to get on social media and talk about the life of crime, talk about the life of gangs, talk about the life of money, you know, talk about the cars, the jewelry, all of those things, material, you know, that's all good. All of those things are surface. And some of us, just because certain things happen in our lives, we don't have the motivation that we need to succeed, to put us in a position where we could be our best possible selves. So sometimes, even though it may not be as entertaining, sometimes we got to have certain talks like this, certain conversations like this. So if this video benefited you in any way, hit the like button, man. Drop a comment if you want. Share the video. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. This is a different kind of video, but we're going to be bringing, we just talk about a whole lot of different content, because at the end of the day, we're trying to find out what's really good. And if some of y'all look at my videos and y'all see, okay, sometime I'll talk about things like this, sometime I'll talk about things like this, you know, you may want to understand, well, nowadays, given the fact that, you know, I speak maybe with a little bit of sense about myself, what's good with all of those other things that I be talking about? Those were all part of my journey. And I share certain parts of my journey, certain pieces of myself. And, you know, it's going to be more of that to come. So happy Tuesday to you. Shout out to everybody out there. Make sure, I hope you have a wonderful, blessed, and productive day. And yeah, man, I'm going to catch you on the next one. Tyrone Hunter, what's really good?